Allen Lund Company looks forward to seeing you at Matt's in March. OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
What is Labor Secretary nominee Lori Chavez DeRemer's stance now on the controversial worker classification bill known as the PRO Act? And will the new Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, do anything to address the security risks of connected vehicles? Mark Schremer of Landline Magazine and Scott Thompson discuss. The results are in from a recent FMCSA truck parking study. Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine talks with Jolanda Protzi, the study's principal investigator. From New York City's congestion pricing program ending to federal cuts and their effect on roadway safety, Mark Schremer of Landline Magazine returns with Tyson Fisher to discuss the biggest stories of the week. And finally, Marty Ellis either hears about or sees truckers who leave their rig at the fuel island for an extended period. And honestly, Marty doesn't like it. I'll talk with the man who drives the spirit of the American trucker. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. As President Trump continues to round out his cabinet, we're keeping an eye on the nominees that could have some power over your livelihoods in one shape or another. We've got two such nominees to focus on today, and joining us with the details is Mark Schremer of Landline Magazine. Mark, always good to see you.
Yeah, glad to be here, Scott.
And in a moment, we're going to get to one cabinet member who is no longer a nominee after being confirmed by the Senate. But first, let's talk about Lori Chavez DeRemer, President Trump's pick to lead the Labor Department. She went through a hearing this week, and her past support for the PRO Act was brought up more than a few times. And that's what we're really going to focus on here, because I think it's the one thing that really kind of correlates with the trucking industry. We should probably start with some background on the PRO Act and its relation to trucking, though.
Yeah, so, it basically, if you look at with the PRO Act, a lot of this all relates to been, in recent years, so much controversy about worker classification laws. And anybody that's been paying attention to this stuff has probably heard the terms ABC test or California's AB5. Yep. And basically, the concern and the kind of controversy over this is whether the ABC test is too stringent in determining whether or not you can be an independent contractor. And the opponents of that test, or AB5 or the PRO Act, often are that, I should be an independent contractor. I have free control. This is what I want to be. I don't want to be an employee. And the worry is that these sort of rules kind of force those people to be employees because the test is too stringent. And if you remember, the previous person that was nominated under the last administration for Department of Labor role, Julie Su, a big reason that she did not ever get confirmed as the permanent secretary of the Department of Labor were her ties to California's AB5 and ABC test and concerns that she was going to enact the PRO Act and do those sort of things. So here we are, now with the Trump administration picks its nominee for the Department of Labor, and the Trump administration has been well outspoken in its opposition to the Biden approach to worker classification rules, but the nominee actually was a co-sponsor of the PRO Act. So as you might guess, that was a hot topic, a big part of the conversation at her confirmation hearing this week.
And I think that's one reason why it was kind of a surprise when President Trump, then President-elect Trump, named Chavez DeRemer for this post, because it was pointed out very early on from people who are watching this kind of thing that she did support the PRO Act previously. That said, during her hearing, it was pretty clear that she was trying to walk back that previous support and essentially said, we're not going that route if I am confirmed.
Yeah, I think so. Also to give the kind of background, so she was a representative of Oregon at the time, and OOIDA will also be in line with some of that there are problems with workers being misclassified. Basically, the main argument to the PRO Act or ABC test is just that it's not going in with a scalpel. It's just going in and smashing the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the issue with it. And so she has kind of admitted that that knew that something needed to be done. She, I think, in quote, said that PRO Act was not a perfect plan, but also, as you said, kind of distanced herself from it, saying, hey, that was my role for my constituents of Oregon at the time to be a co-sponsor of this. But now my role, if confirmed, would be to enact what the Trump administration wants to do and taking that approach. And so it feels like everything involved that, we shouldn't have any concerns that just because she becomes Secretary of the Department of Labor, that the PRO Act or ABC test or any of that stuff would become a federal thing. It seems like she is going to fall in line with what the Trump administration wants to do.
Yeah, and it does seem like she will be confirmed, and obviously we'll have an update on that when, I guess, if and when that time comes. One more thing here. I teased the nominee who's no longer a nominee, that person being Howard Lutnick. He was confirmed this week as Commerce Secretary. Not a whole lot, usually, of overlap between trucking and the Department of Commerce. We don't talk about it very much, but the issue of connected vehicles is one that we'll be keeping an eye on here. There is no rule for the commercial sector, we should mention, although we were kind of close not that long ago, just a few months ago, right? Yeah.
So, and Howard Lutnick, I think, was confirmed 5145, so it was a bit of a controversial one there, but he got through. And, as far as on the connected vehicles, they fast-tracked this rule because there are concerns, especially under the previous administration, about foreign adversaries, China, Russia, for instance, that these connected vehicles, if those components are coming from there, that there are true national security concerns. The original rulemaking was supposed to address cars as well as heavy vehicles. But then as they tried to fast track it before Biden's administration ran out, on January 16th, they put it out, and it was only for cars, only for vehicles weighing 10,000 pounds or less. So heavy vehicles were not included in it. What's concerning about that is in the rule, they said, this in no way means that we're not concerned about commercial vehicles with this national security and cybersecurity issues. They actually, phrased it as grave concerns. But they basically didn't have time to get it done, and there's some extra complications with commercial motor vehicles. So the plan was to, within a few months, issue an next rule. Now we have a change in administration, a new leader. So I know OOIDA wants the Department of Commerce to move forward with this, and we'll see how that, we'll probably know more in a couple of months.
January 16th? Was it only a month ago? It feels like it was
about
7
years.
That's exactly what I was going to say. There you go. Mark Shermer of Landline Magazine, everybody. And Mark, we'll see you back here shortly. But for now, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And that's Landline Now News for this Friday. Mark Rettig, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. Congratulations to Anthony F. Reynolds of Harlingen, Texas. He's received the OOIDA Safe Driving Award for 26 years of safe, accident-free driving. That's the equivalent of a car driver going 195 years without causing a single accident. Next, Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine talks with Jolanda Protze, the principal investigator of an FMCSA truck parking study. And Mark Schremer and Tyson Fisher discuss the biggest stories of the week. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit capitalreman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
Running on ultra-low sulfur diesel? Stay protected this winter with Howe's Diesel Treat and Diesel Lifeline. Steer clear of gel and ice with North America's #1 trusted brand. Find Howe's products nationwide at select retailers, auto parts stores, truck stops, and on Amazon.com.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Results are in from a recent truck parking study by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Landline Magazine's Tyson Fisher spoke with the principal investigator of the study and joins us with that interview.
Truck parking has been an industry-wide problem across the nation for a long time now. So it really hit the federal government's radar back in 2012 with the Jason's Law, which essentially directs the Department of Transportation to look into the issue. Several studies have been conducted since. Some of those studies have opened door to new questions, which prompted more studies. But just recently, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration released its latest truck parking study. So with me to talk about that study is the principal investigator of that study, Yolanda Prasi. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you, Tyson. Thank you for having me.
So, as I mentioned, there have been, many truck parking studies over the years tackling different aspects of the issue. So what does this latest truck parking study look into specifically?
Yeah, thank you, Tyson. So in this latest FMCSA study, we tried to understand the use of truck parking facilities along two corridors, the I-80 and the I-94 corridor in Wisconsin. And so the idea behind this study was to understand how truckers first use the truck parking facilities. So when and where do they park at different times of the day along these two corridors? But then we really wanted to delve into understanding the benefits of using app-based technologies, such as the Park Unload app that we used in our study, to provide drivers with truck parking information in real time and at a very granular level. So, the app allows us to not only share with drivers that there's a few spots in the rest areas coming up, but it also provides the ability to direct drivers directly to where those free spots are in the rest area or in a truck stop.
Yeah, and I really want to talk about that specifically, the app, because I think I think the truckers would find that to be the more fascinating part of the study. But before we do, I want to get to the two other points first. You talked about the usage of those parking spaces. Again, this is the I-94, I-80 corridors in Iowa, Wisconsin. So let's get to that part first. So what did the data reveal about the existing truck parking usage in the studied area?
So we partnered with the University of Wisconsin at Madison with Professor Ernest Perry from that institute, and they analyzed or they captured the data from the TPIMS project. So we used that information to actually understand how rest area capacity is used. And, analyzing the data, and as we showed in the report, there's this typical pattern where in the evening hours, you see more trucks coming to the rest area, staying there, and then by 6-7 o'clock in the morning, they start to leave the facilities again. What we did identify with the analysis of the data is that there's certain rest areas that the demand almost always exceed the capacity. But then there are other facilities along the corridor where there are capacity available as well. So we did find that not all facilities along the corridor is filled to the complete capacity, every single hour of the night. And that, even in some cases when you would expect the facility to be at capacity, like 1 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, there are spaces available, which for us means that, the information about the availability of these spaces is potentially lacking.
Sure. And so with that being said, the study looked into unauthorized parking. So what did you see in terms of trucks parking where basically they're not supposed to?
Yeah, so we had a small data set that we acquired, and what we saw, which was super interesting, was that at these facilities where the demand for truck parking already exceeds the capacity of the spaces, we saw a lot of drivers parking on the exit and entry ramps to those facilities. So, that's information I think that's super helpful in understanding where drivers want to park.
Sure.
So we also found that in along those two corridors, when truckers parked in call it an unauthorized location, it tended to be on the entrance and exit ramps of facilities that's already like at capacity or over capacity.
Sure.
In terms of usage.
And you mentioned TPIMS, and just to clarify for anyone watching, so that's the Truck Parking Information Management System. That's being deployed in, I believe it's 8 Midwestern states. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. So that being said, I really would like to spend the rest of the time talking about the app, because I know that there's a lot of industry outreach heading into this study. I know that we've even reported on it back in July of 2022 to kind of get people to participate in this. And so now here we are, the study's been completed. We have the results. And I think the most interesting part of the study to the truck parkers will be this. So, can you just really briefly summarize what this pilot program was doing?
Yeah, sure. So we worked with the Iowa DOT and the Wisconsin DOT. And so, I will always give a big shout out to Iowa and Wisconsin for allowing us to pilot this app at their rest areas. We reached out widely to the public and the private sector in order to get these test beds, and Iowa and Wisconsin was willing to go on this journey with us. But in essence, what we did is we tested the app at 4 parking spaces in 9 rest areas along these 2 corridors, 6 rest areas along I-80 in Iowa, and then 3 rest areas along I-94 in Wisconsin. And so, I can take a step back and just explain the working of the app. But basically, it's a super low-cost technology. A Bluetooth transponder is attached to a parking sign that designates or that covers a certain area of the rest area. So in our cases, we tested 4 parking spaces. This Bluetooth technology sends out a ping, and the truck driver is required to download the app on their phone. And as soon as this app connects with this, receives this ping, the app knows that where the driver is. And so for the driver to park, he just clicks the button to say that he has arrived. He checks in, and then the space is considered occupied, and that information is shared with all the drivers that have downloaded that technology. So they will know of those 4 spaces, 1 has been occupied.
The study also mentions that there was a major hurdle here, and that one of the hurdles here was the lack of, truck drivers, using the technology. There was a lot of outreach, you all did your due diligence on that part, but regardless, truck drivers just weren't using the app. And so there's kind of like an issue. It's like, are truckers using these apps? And so that's something that you kind of found in your study, right?
Yeah. And so, it was very interesting because, as you mentioned, we did a lot of outreach in the beginning. We were on site talking with truck drivers long before, we started the pilot or before we started the pilot. We used outlets like yourself to communicate information about the pilot. We went on many trucking shows where we talked about the project. We had flyers that we distributed. We had flyers in the rest area. We worked with the trucking associations. We shared information with the trucking associations. We used social media, both paid and unpaid. But it's difficult to gauge how many truckers first received the information, and then secondly, how many were willing to participate in the pilot. We had several hundred download the app. Most of them were one-time users. They used it once, but they didn't use it on a consistent basis. Some drivers told us it's because they don't use these corridors on a regular basis. One thing that for me was also very interesting about this study is that when you looked at the social media responses that we got to the pilot project, it was overwhelmingly negative.
Shocker, right? On social media.
But then, when we talked to the truckers at the rest areas, and when we surveyed the truckers that use the app, we had a more positive response. But it's difficult to exactly say why we couldn't convince more truckers to use the app. But some of the comments that we received back was, first, it was just a pilot study. Sure. So there was a reluctance maybe there to commit to the app. And then secondly, which was a very interesting insight that that was shared with me, I was making a presentation on this study at a FMCSA gathering, and there was truckers that participated or attended that gathering. And one of the drivers came up to me and she said that she understands the value of the app and she understands the benefits of an app. But boy, oh boy, it's just another app that she needs to download. And she already has an app for so many other services. And it was just another app. And, her worry was that if every DOT comes with its own app or every rest area comes with its own app, how many apps would she have to download? So there is that I would mention it because that was a concern that was.
Oh, great. Well, again, I appreciate you talking with me and I appreciate your work you do.
Thank you, Tyson.
That was Tyson Fisher talking about the recent truck parking study done by FMCSA. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
At TruckStop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on TruckStop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Welcome back to Landline Now. The whirlwind of trucking news continues to swirl around. It's been a busy week, from congestion pricing in New York City on the chopping block to confirmation hearings on Capitol Hill to much more. So we'll try and cover high points and the low with two men here who have all the answers. Mark Schirmer and Tyson Fisher. Mark is senior editor and Tyson is associate editor of Landline Magazine. Gentlemen, good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
I have 80% of the answers, but that's good for a B.
Hey, there you go.
We're going to get you up to 85% by the end of this. Let's start with congestion pricing in New York City. A big story this week, something Governor Kathy Hochul pushed through really at the 11th hour before President Biden left office. The thinking there, Tyson, was that putting that in place before the change in administration was going to kind of protect it, but it appears that thinking proved wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. So last May, Trump, he announced on social media that he was going to get rid of congestion pricing, and now here we are. So we kind of anticipated this. But yeah, as you pointed out, Hochul tried to protect it, but, the Trump administration was, hell-bent on finding a way to get rid of this. Now, there was a lot of speculation that the way they were going about doing that was to attack the environmental review process, which is the center of all the various lawsuits. But they chose a different route. And so what they did was the Department of Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, he basically revoked the approval for the congestion pricing. So the way that this works is that you cannot toll existing federally funded highways, but there is an exception through the value pricing pilot program, which allows about 15 states to do that. New York is one of them. However, in order to take advantage of that program, whatever tolling project that you have in mind has to be approved by the Federal Highway Administration. So I think in November, New York got that approval from the Highway Administration to do that. And so basically what Sean Duffy is saying is no, the Biden administration, Federal Highway Administration got it wrong. They should not have given you that approval for this project from the value pricing pilot program. And he gave two reasons. The first reason is he called congestion pricing unprecedented in that it gives motorists no toll-free option. And so that's one of the biggest issues that I know the trucking industry has, which is we can't use transit because we just can't use it. You can't
it's our jobs, yeah.
Right.
We're going where we got to go.
And so if you want to get into this area, you have to pay the toll. There is no way around it. Now, conversely, every other tolling project under the value pricing pilot program has some way to where you can get around the toll. You can take a different highway or you can take side streets or whatever. So this is the first time that such a scheme to where it's unavoidable has been tried. And what Duffy is saying is Congress did not authorize this kind of tolling scheme in this value pricing pilot program, so you just don't have the authority to do it, full stop there. But then he gave a second reason, which is that the congestion pricing is it is primarily a revenue stream for the Metropolitan Transit Authority, whereas reducing congestion is just a secondary priority. But the thing is, with this, with this value pricing pilot program, the whole point of these projects is to relieve congestion. And so when that is the secondary thought here, they're it goes against the whole purpose, the spirit of this program. So he said, for these two reasons, congestion pricing, we never even had the authority to give you that approval in the first place, so we're revoking it right now.
Yeah, no one in the trucking industry is crying over this move. My question is this a done deal? I know there are legal challenges being raised at this point. I guess what do those look like, and how likely it is that we're going to see this reversed again down the line?
This is going to be a long, hard-fought battle for sure. So Governor Hochul that same day had a press conference to where she said she will not be turning the cameras off. So in defiance, she said congestion pricing will continue. It's going on right now as we speak. And that also the same day that they received that letter from the Department of Transportation, the Metropolitan Transportation Administration, MTA, they filed a lawsuit that same day. So they knew that this was going to happen. They had to have known to file that lawsuit. Yeah. So there's already a lawsuit challenging this. Again, the governor is digging in her heels, saying, no, we're keeping this going. So, I mean, to answer your question, what is the fate of this? I mean, it's going to be in the hands of the courts. I think, in my opinion, I think it's going to take a court order to get the governor to officially shut down congestion pricing. So until that happens, it's going to continue. There's going to proceed business as usual.
Stay tuned on that. We'll certainly have updates, I'm sure. Not the last we're going to hear about this story. I want to move on to another here. President Trump's pick to serve as deputy secretary under DOT Secretary Sean Duffy went through a confirmation hearing on Thursday. Mark, we don't normally cover these confirmation hearings of undersecretaries all that closely, usually. This one, however, did yield some interesting conversations. I know there is some we've heard about this for a long time, concern out there about cutting back at these agencies, how that's going to maybe compromise safety, especially with regard to transportation. Yeah. But Stephen Bradbury, the deputy secretary nominee here, really pushed back on that notion during his hearing, right?
Yeah, and obviously with the Trump administration, hearing a lot about regulatory rollback, and and so that is definitely a question. And this idea of cutting costs and balancing with while not hindering safety. Now, you had some pushback from some Democrats, and you can understand it when you talk about like the FAA and all of the incidents that we've had with aviation here recently. And they're saying, okay, how can you be cutting it into that? When we kind of turn more into like the trucking automobile part of it, one of the things that Mr. Bradbury kind of focused on was that affordability is a critical component of safety. For instance, we have all of these kind of one of the ways that the avenue that we've seen in the last 10, 20 years to improve roadway safety often is to put new technology or gadgets on the trucks or on the automobiles to make them safer, whether it's automatic emergency braking systems or speed limiting devices or whatever the case may be that they want to do. And his argument was that, affordability, being able to buy these newer vehicles and be able to afford them is a component of safety. And every time that you put a mandate of something like that, it ends up being passed on down to whether it's the small business owner, the truck driver, or the, just a regular car driver. And they were showing stats that, more older vehicles are on the highways now. And the argument was that is something that's actually less safe, having vehicles that are 15, 20 years old out on the roads, as opposed to being able to afford a new car and have those new vehicles out on the road, at a quicker pace.
And of real interest to our listeners and your readers out there is what the DOT under President Trump, under Sean Duffy, under presumably Stephen Bradbury here, assuming that he's confirmed, what that looks like in terms of rolling back regulations that truck drivers really care about. Hours of service, I know, is something that is talked about all the time, reforming that system. Broker transparency, we're going to talk about here in a moment, but it'll be curious to see how the DOT approaches some of these issues that the trucking industry really cares about in terms of regulatory reform.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that Mr. Bradbury served as general counsel of the Department of Transportation during President Trump's first term. So he was there when hours of service reform came through, for instance, kind of rolling back, providing more flexibility to drivers. Now, truck drivers would like even more flexibility within those hours of service. So maybe something like that'll happen. We'll also see like what happens with broker transparency as something that's not a rollback. That's something that drivers want, but that's something that we'll look at and see if they're going to be protecting drivers of that instance. But speed limiters is a huge one that we've talked about. We don't foresee the Trump administration, moving forward with a speed limiter rulemaking mandating on heavy vehicles. And this confirmation hearing and the comments from presumably, or at least the nominee of Deputy Secretary Bradbury seems like is another thing to make you think that speed limiters are not going to happen.
Yeah, they are not in the next almost 4 years here at least. Well, I think that's probably a safe bet there. Speaking of rolling back regulations, the EPA forging ahead here with plans to reverse 3 vehicle emissions rules for good, Tyson, and Congress has now taken the baton on this.
Yeah, again, so Trump said he's going to roll back the electric vehicle mandates. So this is part of that. So yeah, California's got 3 waivers: Advanced Clean Cars 2, Advanced Clean Trucks, and the Heavy Duty Omnibus Regulation. The EPA has kicked that can has punted this to Congress. So it's now in the hands of Congress to basically get rid of these 3 regulations. The way they're going to go about doing that is through a Congressional Review Act resolution. This is kind of an interesting method to do this. A lot of people thought he was going to do it through the regulatory process through the EPA. Instead, the Trump administration decided to go through the legislative process. And so what makes that unique is that if they successfully get rid of these rules through the Congressional Review Act, the EPA can't come back with the future administration and then reinstate them. Once this rule is, again, taken away through the Congressional Review Act, the same or a similar rule cannot be reinstated. It will take a literal act of Congress to get that back. So right now, Advanced Clean Cars, the Congressional Review Act resolution for Advanced Clean Cars 2 has been filed. That was filed earlier this week. It's just a matter of time before a similar resolution is introduced for Advanced Clean Trucks and the Heavy Duty Omnibus Regulation. Real quick, something that's worth noting is that this is a controversial move in that the Congressional Review Act allows Congress to review a new rule within 60 days of it going into effect. Advanced Clean Trucks went to effect in March of 2023.
More than 60 days.
A little bit more. Just a little past that.
Did the math.
But the Trump administration is going through a loophole in that the Biden's EPA, when granting the waiver for Advanced Clean Trucks, did not submit the rule to Congress for review, which, I think it was the Office of Regulatory Affairs said, yeah, that's about right. We'll allow it. Now the Trump administration is saying, no, they got that wrong too. This has to go to review. And so they can restart that clock by having it reviewed from the Congressional Review Act. So anyway, it's a loophole that they're doing this. So even if it does get past Congress and, if Trump signs this to law, it's going to be challenged.
Do you have any stories that are not complicated, Tyson, that you've been covering lately? There's like caveats and fine print with all this stuff. But yeah, it's that another one of these complicated issues that we'll keep an eye on, but certainly probably going to be challenged here on a number of fronts. But we'll keep an eye on that as well. Wanted to mention real quick, we don't have a whole lot of time, Mark, but the broker transparency comment period window back open. We see comment periods extended all the time. Yeah. It's very rare that we see one reopen like this.
Yeah. So I think it comes down to the timing. The petition to extend was about 2 days before the original deadline of January 21st. And also we have to think too, we had administration change during that time. So we had new people looking at it. So now, that comes in. Now we got another 30 days. We got until March 20th. We got nearly 5,000 comments on the first run. So if you're a truck driver and, you were concerned about the lack of broker transparency and you didn't comment in the first time, or even if you did and you got more things that you want to say, you have until March 20th, a second chance here to get, your voice heard.
Fightingfortruckers.com.
Yep.
Well, that's the easiest way probably to go about doing that. If you have already commented or want to comment again, one-stop shop for doing just that. You can check out Mark and Tyson's work over on our website, landline.media, and of course, in every issue of Landline Magazine. Mark, Tyson, we thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
And with that, we'll take a quick breather, but don't go far. We've got more Landline Now coming up on the other side.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline now. Welcome back. Every week we check in with Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker. Remember when a trip to the fuel island at your favorite truck stop was uneventful? There was nothing happening that was too exciting or irritating or even out of the ordinary. However, these days, Marty either hears about or sees some truckers who are leaving their rig at the fuel island for an extended period. And honestly, Marty doesn't like it.
Carolina west to Denver, up to Bangor, west to Austin, coast to coast, sea to sea, sail on, sail on.
Well, Marty, how are you?
I am lovely, Mark, and you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Now, I usually ask where you're at, but you're actually coming off some home time. Are you back on the road yet?
Not quite yet. We're going to be down at the TA Express in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and that'll be the 25th and the 26th. That's I-555, exit 39, and they have 90 parking spots and a KFC.
Okay, KFC. Well, I mean, that's food.
Some people really like it.
I know. There are people that are very fond of their KFC. I shouldn't joke about that. Let's talk about some of the stuff that truckers have been talking to you about. I know there's so many topics on your list that we don't ever get to them all, but you caught my attention with one. You said there'd been some mayhem at a fuel island. What happened?
Yeah, some of the locations that I go to, they have me set up like right beside the fuel island or, very close to the fuel island. So I get to see a lot of the stuff that goes on. And you would think, at a fuel island, it shouldn't really be anything eventful. People go up and fuel, then you go park, that type of thing. But you always hear the stories about people going in and showering and while they're at the fuel islands. Well, every once in a while, you'll actually see that. People getting out with their backpack while their truck is still on the fuel island and going inside and not coming out for about a half hour. So it does happen, and it did happen the other day. And that's not the only thing that was going on. Some of them were they weren't going in showering, but they must have been doing a whole lot of other things and not being out in a timely manner or parking their truck before the fuel island. Maybe they were waiting for a spot at some point in time, but they go in and do some things. And then when they pull up, they finally decide now it's time to fuel. Well, they've already burned up the people's behind them time during all that. So a lot of emotions can get going kind of high. And, back a couple of years ago when I was regular trucking, I guess it's been more than a couple, somebody was out and got stabbed with a knife out there in Washington at one of the truck stops. And it's like, it's kind of scary that we're going to get that worked up over, fueling up.
Yeah, and I've heard of folks taking the 30-minute break, just sitting there for 30 minutes right there at the fuel island, which probably isn't as long as a shower, but it could be close to it. And yet I don't understand why they see that as a parking spot.
Yeah, and especially it's really irritating when there are plenty of spots out in the parking lot to go to park, take your break, do whatever you got to do, and then you can go on your mad merry way. But you're right, so many people are using that for their 30-minute break, and it sure can make other people that are in a lot more of a hurry, they can get them all worked up.
I know that you may not have an answer to this, Marty, but I just have to wonder what people are thinking when they do that. Is this just a matter that, and I should say, we all know that most truckers, the overwhelming majority, are not pulling this crap. But that little percentage of them can make a lot of problems for everybody else. Is it just inconsideration? Is it self-absorption? Or is it something else?
I think it's a combination of those two. Plus, I know that there are companies out there that literally when your tires turn at all, they will turn your e-log on. So that's an issue. The law doesn't call for that, but some companies have set up their e-logs to do that. So once they get stopped, part of that 30-minute break can be on-duty fueling. So they're using that time, but if they move that tire, then they lose that time that they spent. So I kind of get it, but boy, you're really leaving yourself to a whole lot of grief if there's people that are waiting behind you.
Yeah, that's not something that's going to generate a lot of patience and understanding.
No, it is not.
Well, something else you mentioned, and I'm kind of curious where this came up, but you mentioned in there for people to get out and look. I'm kind of curious the situation that brought that phrase to your mind.
Yeah, and that was another parking lot deal that came up. And, for the longest time now, a lot of the companies put it on their mirrors, the goal, get out and look. And there was a mishap at one of the truck stops that I was at. And some of the time, that's all it takes is for you to get out and look, and trying to get some people to understand it's better to get out and look 15 times rather than the one time you actually hit something that you shouldn't hit. And that's going to cost you a whole lot more time than taking your time and getting out and looking, and just to make sure that everything is clear before you proceed.
That's interesting. And I assume you're talking about when people are backing up into the parking spaces, right?
Yeah, well, and not only backing up, but going forward. You want to make sure that nobody's walking in front of you, because especially like when you're leaving a fuel island, there's people coming and going all the time. But, especially, summer's going to be coming up. You're going to have families out here with drivers, kids running around. And, of course, there's always pets. We got to really be conscious about what's happening around us, and it doesn't hurt to go out and get out and look one more time before leaving, just to make sure.
Absolutely. And especially when you talk about kids, I remember talking to one of our members years ago that brought his grandson, who I think at the time was about 8, he's probably 30 now. Anyway, he told his grandson to take off his cap and wave it over his head whenever he went through the parking lot. He did tell him to look and watch and make sure he's not getting in front of someone, but just something to make himself more noticeable. But when you're talking about a small person around a very big truck, boy, you talk about blind spots.
Absolutely. And that's a great idea with waving your cap. I try to make eye contact with somebody that's sitting in the driver's seat before I go walking in front of them, because their mind may not be on looking for me.
There you go. Absolutely. And safety's got to come first, especially in those situations. Some of the bigger truck stops, I don't know how they manage that traffic without people hitting something, whether it's another truck or, God forbid, something else. But it is kind of a very complicated ballet. Let's call it that.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody needs to be playing their part.
Okay. Well, Marty, we're kind of out of time here. After you're in Jonesboro, where are you going after that?
We are going to be down at the Petro in Bucksville, Alabama, and that's I-29 and I-59 exit 100. And they have 255 parking spots in Iron Skillet and the Popeyes. We'll be there February 28th through March 2nd.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a good one. And in the meanwhile, Marty, take care. Any last words before you head out?
Yeah. Just be kind to one another and give that driver next to you a break.
Brothers of the highway, children of the wind.
Once again, that was Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker. You can find Marty's next stop on our show and every day at our website, landlinenow.com. That includes truck stops, truck shows, and other special events across the country. Again, that's at landlinenow.com. That's our program for today. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars. Fishing.
My kids.
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.